All right, thank you so much for your time today. Dan Raphael, my longtime friend who over the weekend was able to sit in on the Boxing Writers Association of America meeting where we talked about the year-end awards in all of the major categories for the sport. Now, look, Dan, we can sit here and talk all day probably about it being a down year in boxing, but at the end of the day, there's still some awards to give out, and I know you guys scrutinized it pretty thoroughly, and you have always been I would say the person who's most aware of everything that's going on with international fights that you've watched and some of the other things with all of your various sources across the world. So I wanted to have you on today and just take us through how the voting went on all the categories and let the viewers decide, if they agree, disagree, and what your thoughts were. So first of all, let's just go right to the chase. Talk about to me, the most significant award of the year, which is the Sugar Ray Robinson Fighter of the Year. And the six candidates that were named at the Saturday's meeting were unbeaten light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol, Hector Luis Garcia, who has posted two significant victories this year, Devin Haney, who went to Australia twice to defeat George Kambosos, Naya Inoue, who looked sensational recently in a complete blowout victory. Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who was actually in the pole position to win this award, I thought, until sort of a subdued effort in his most recent fight. And then Kenshiro Taraji, who, again, you can tell us a little bit about. But, I mean, I know, Dan, we were just talking before we started the show, and you said, look, right now, I'm still kind of processing who's going to win these awards. When you look at Fighter of the Year, to me, it seems pretty clear that Dimitri Bivol is the winner. Is there much debate in this about this in your mind?
Well, Lance, there's a lot of good candidates as you just read down the list. And just so people are clear, every year, and you're a member of the Boxing Writers Association of America, I don't know why you missed our call, but you weren't on it. In any event, we did a Zoom call. Usually we do it in person around a big fight. That wasn't doable this year. So we gathered on the Zoom on Saturday and hashed it out for a while to come up with our nominees for all of the major categories. There are 8 categories in total. Then there are some other awards that the membership as a whole does not get involved with. There's a separate committee that will do a women's fighter of the year, a women's fight of the year. And there's also the past winners of the Nat Fleischer Award, of which you and I are both past winners, who vote on the next winner. That's for the career excellence in boxing journalism. But on the main awards, as you mentioned, in terms of the fighter of the year for this year, I mean, to me, they're all worthy candidates. Every single one of them. They all have important and laudable accomplishments. But to me, Dimitri Bivol, this is the one that I'm not that I don't have a problem saying that's who I'm voting for, because to me it was long decided. When you upset Canelo Alvarez, the number one fighter pound for pound and the biggest star in the sport, and people who want a Monday morning quarterback and saying that wasn't a real upset, they're just lying to themselves, because it was an upset. Most people pick Canelo. He was the heavy betting favorite. He was supposed to win that fight. And then Dimitri Bivol didn't just win the fight, but did so in convincing fashion. It was a great performance. And then he followed that up with a one-sided rout of the undefeated legitimate number one contender in Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, a former champion at super middleweight, a guy that had been chasing Bivol around and calling him out for the better part of a year plus. And they took their business to the ring, and he systematically broke him apart and won. I don't know, Lance, what, 11 out of 12 rounds, maybe 12 rounds. Maybe at worst he only won 10 rounds. But when you take apart the number one fighter in the world pound for pound in an upset, and then you throw a basic rout against the guy that was the clear and number one contender, who was also undefeated in that match, to me that's a recipe for fighter of the year. And again, all those other fighters did great things. Hector Garcia with the 2 upsets and also winning a title at junior lightweight. You had Haney flew 8,000 miles across the world to become the undisputed lightweight champ, and then went back to Australia to do it again. Granted, he was favored in the fight, but it took a lot for him to do that deal. In a way, first ever, 2 wins, both by knockout against Donaire and then Paul Butler. But the Butler fight, he unified 3 belts against Donaire, and then he got the 4th belt against Butler. There's never been a 3 or 4 belt unified bantamweight champion until Inoue did it just a couple weeks ago. You have to go all the way back, Lance, to 1972 before you can even find an undisputed champion in the two belt era. So what he did was very special. Now he's moving up in weight. And as you mentioned, Bam Rodriguez with 3 wins, 2 big wins against Quadras and Sarungvisai. Took that first fight against Quadras on short notice, moved up a weight class, and performed extremely well against the former champion. Then 2-time champion Sarungvisai knocked him out. And then even though he maybe hadn't have a brilliant performance against Israel Gonzalez, still scored a clear win and a very solid victory on his resume. And Taraji, who may not be the most known fighter in America, but he had lost his title to Masamichi Ibuki. They had a rematch earlier this year, and he knocked him out in the 3rd round to regain his title, which was the WBC title at 108 pounds. And then he hooked up in a unification fight with his countryman from Japan, Hiroto Kayaguchi, who was a very exciting, very significant fighter. A lot of people thought Kayaguchi would win that fight. And Taraji didn't just win, but he knocked him out. And that was another great performance. So a lot of worthy candidates, but to me, Bivol is the guy.
Yeah, no, thank you for laying it all out for us, Dan. I really appreciate that. I mean, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I mean, Devin Haney, you could have said is in the leaders, in the clubhouse with the lead too after going to Australia for the first time against Kambosos. I think it was just a matter of he won that fight so convincingly that for a lot of people it was like, okay, well, this is going to happen again. And like we were saying,
he was also the favorite. And again, I take nothing away from Haney. I give him massive respect.
Absolutely not. He's probably like 2 or 3 for sure in this poll.
Yeah. But if you're theoretically supposed to win, and there's other guys that do similar big accomplishments who are deemed by the media and or the public that you're not supposed to win, that means something. So in this kind of category, and I know it's cliche, but just to be nominated, it's a big deal. There's a lot of great fighters in boxing, and there's a lot of fighters that box professionally. And this is the cream of the crop of what happened in 2022.
Let's just stay in this category real quick because I wanted to add a follow-up question that's connected to 3 of the guys. Tell me who you want each of these guys to fight next. Dimitri Bivol.
I would love him to see fight. I'd love to see him fight Arthur Beterbiev for undisputed. Now Beterbiev has a January fight against his mandatory Anthony Yarde. If he wins that fight, I mean, I would love to see that fight. It's a fight that Bivol has said he wants. He wants to be undisputed. He's been asked many times about the prospect of a rematch with Canelo, which would certainly be worth more money. But as he has said, look, the money will be there, but he's made a lot of money already. He wants that 4th belt. He wants that legacy. So Dimitri Bivol and I are in agreement. The fight that we'd like to see him involved in the next fight would certainly be against Arthur Beterbiev. What a tremendous style matchup. Just a good fight.
Oh, my gosh. And speaking of great fights, Devin Haney.
There's a lot of great fighters out there, but I'm definitely down for the fight that's in the works, which is him against Lomachenko. That's the OG technician against the young star technician, and we'll see who is which guy comes out on top. Is it the old Jedi or the young Jedi?
It seems to be only a matter of the calendar with that fight, right? Devin wants it to be a little bit earlier than what is it being talked about, May?
Yeah, I mean, the issue I think right now is not so much nothing to do with the deal itself or the opponent. It's that Devin is a Muslim and Devin is going to observe Ramadan, and he wants the fight to take place before Ramadan begins rather than after Ramadan, because then he believes it would cut short his ability to train properly after Ramadan, that he wouldn't have enough time to get ready. And he also, he's the first to admit he struggles to make 135 pounds. I think this has to be, or most likely will be, his last fight at 135. He wants to get the fight done around March timeframe. Then he could have that fight, and then whatever happens, win or lose, then he would observe the Muslim holiday, and then whatever takes place in the next part of the year. So they're trying to figure that out. But that's the fight that everybody seems to want to make. And lightweight's a good division right now. But Lomachenko Haney's a really interesting fight to me. But I'd love this. Again, I know that it's one fight at a time. But for Haney, who wouldn't want to also see him fight a Tank Davis or Ryan Garcia? I mean, even though Ryan's not fighting at a little above 135, but there's good matchups. But bring on the Lomachenko fight, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and then lastly, Inoue.
Well, Inoue is gonna, after having unified all the titles at 118, he said before the fight, and then he said again after the fight, that that's his last fight at bantamweight. He's going in search for a title in a 4th weight class. He's going to move up to the junior featherweight division. So if you're going to the junior featherweight division, the great fight that you can make in that weight class, in my mind, is him against Stephen Fulton Jr., who's got 2 of the titles. I mean, look, we're talking about what we want, not what is realistic.
Exactly.
So That's a hard fight to make. It's PBC. It's top ranked. Stephen Fulton is most likely going to the featherweight division in a rematch for the interim title of the WBC against Brandon Figueroa. I had a exchange with him on Twitter, and then we later took it to direct message where he's like, look, that may be the fight, but don't count me out of taking an Inoue fight too. You know, Fulton's got a good head on his shoulders, and he knows what he wants. He understands what it would mean to have a fight of the magnitude of a fight against Inoue, not only in an ability for him to defend his titles against a world-known star-level fighter and a pound-for-pound guy, that would mean for his legacy and also, frankly, for his pocketbook, you know, for his bank account. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I think it's quite possible, actually, that maybe Fulton could get that fight against Figueroa, which is being planned by PBC, was approved by the WBC at their recent convention.
Yeah.
And then after that fight could perhaps fight Inoue, who I don't know is, you know, maybe he takes a fight at 122 just to get used to the division. And later in that part of the year, maybe he could fight against Fulton. So, you know, if he wants to come back down to 122. So that's the dream match at 122 was Fulton against Inoue. That's another really good fight.
Yeah, I've spoken to Fulton at length about this. I think it was before the first time he went against Figueroa, and he is driven by this. I mean, he loves the idea of unifying. He loves the idea of legacy. And obviously, like you said, it will be a really rich fight. So let's hope that goes down. So let's move on to the next category, which was the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier Award for the Fight of the Year. And the nominees are, you're going to have to help me with some of these pronunciations, Dan. But we've got Jermell Charlo with his KO 10 against Brian Castano in their rematch, a great fight that I was ringside for in Carson, California. Then Sebastian Fundora, KO 9 versus Erickson Lubin. Joe Joyce, KO 11 versus Joe Parker, heavyweights. Okay, Dan, you're up.
Devontae Nanshinga from South Africa in a 12-round decision against Hector Flores for the vacant IBF junior flyweight title. That's a mouthful. That was a matchroom boxing fight that took place in Mexico, that took place on DAZN, and it is a worthy candidate.
And then Jai, how do you pronounce his last name?
Opetaia.
With a victory 12 rounds over Maris Briedis. I know you talked about seeing that fight on ESPN Plus, and there was a broken jaw involved in that fight.
Yeah, Jai Opetaia, he suffered a broken jaw in that fight. Showed a lot of heart, and him and Briedis really went at it. It was just a cracker of a fight, as they say, and the heart that he showed, both guys, and they just put on a great fight. And Opetaia, he won the fight by decision. He's from Australia, but I would not call it a hometown decision. He was the worthy winner. He won the IBF cruiserweight title, and even though it was for that belt, but Briedis also was the ring champion, was the guy in that weight class after having done what he did in recent years post Alexander Usyk's move from cruiserweight up to the heavyweight division. That was a really good fight, and if people didn't get a chance to watch it, it's in the ESPN Plus archive. You can just go on ESPN Plus and call it up. And by the way, with a lot of those fights, I mean, I think that many of them are available to be seen in the in the libraries or like on YouTube. Like PBC puts old fights or Showtime puts their fights on YouTube, and the Joe Joyce Parker fight is also on ESPN Plus. And the last candidate, which I'll tell you, the folks, the last of the nominees was Lee Wood against Michael Conlan in their featherweight title fight. That was spectacular. Also available in the archive on DAZN. So anybody that didn't get a chance to see these, you can easily find them, and they're worth watching, every single one of them.
Now, when I saw the Lee Wood Michael Conlan fight on television, I literally said, like, nothing's going to beat this year, right? I mean, that seemed to be the front runner from what I saw. That was such a great fight, great action. I mean, you spent many hours talking to Michael Conlan. He revealed the heart that he shows us, in every conversation, and it was such an entertaining, smash mouth type affair between those guys.
A big comeback. That's the thing. It's a great fight. That is a tremendous. Even if you take away the 12th round, the entire fight was exciting. But Lee Wood, who had been knocked down earlier in the fight, he rallied back so strong. And not only did he win the fight, but he did it in as dramatic a fashion as possible. He didn't just get the knockout. He literally knocked Michael out of the ring. Thank God Michael was okay. And Michael has since come back and scored a victory since then. But that was just as dramatic as you get. You don't see a lot of 12th round knockouts to come back to keep your title. And when you get the knockout, you put the guy out of the ring. So that had a lot. That was a really good fight. And Charlo Castaño is not getting a lot of love, I don't think. But that, if you go back and watch that, that is just a balls to the wall fight. I think it was even better than their first fight, which was also very, very outstanding. It was for big stakes. Remember, they got the draw in the first fight. A draw, by
very
the way.
High stakes.
Yeah, a lot of people thought Castaño should have gotten the victory in that first fight. They called it a draw. Okay, they did the rematch, and Charlo showed that whatever you thought about the result of the first fight, he stormed back and got the knockout in a spectacular action fight. Not only a great fight, but such high stakes to be the 4-belt undisputed champ at 154. There hadn't been an undisputed champion in that weight class since the 3 belts back in the early 2000s when Winky Wright accomplished that in his first victory against Sugar Shane Mosley. Both of them are Hall of Famers, and the fight of the year. This is honestly, a lot of times, Lance, the fight of the year is easy to pick. There's a lot of great fights, but there's always, like, when you see a Corrales Castillo or a Vasquez Marquez or a Pacquiao, the other Marquez, it's not so hard and complicated to make the pick. I'll go back several years before that legendary fight from France with my boy Somsak Manchapur and Sith Wachakov from Thailand in an absolutely spectacular fight. You watch that, you come away from that fight going, there's nothing that's beating that this year. And it was nothing beat that. This is a year where there are, of those 6 candidates, I feel like at least 4 of them are legitimate to actually can win. Yeah. And I'm not downplaying even the Nanshinga against Hector Flores. Maybe a lot of people didn't get to see that fight, so it might not get the love. I sure hope that the people that are in the BWAA that vote, if they didn't see it, take the time and do what they're supposed to do and do their job, which is to make sure that they're educated about the nominees and watch that fight. Because you don't see a lot of better fights. I mean, when you think about little guys, I mean, the last time I saw a fight like that in that weight class, I think I got to go all the way back to the first fight between Michael Carbajal and Chiquita Gonzalez, which actually was the fight of the year for that year. I mean, this was a spectacular fight. There was drama. If you listen to the corner of Nanshinga during the fight, where his trainer, Colin Nathan, who's a nominee for Trainer of the Year, was giving him the Teddy Atlas speech, do it for your family. I mean, it was just as dramatic and moving as you could get. And the guy went out and did it. And that lends itself to the drama of why you would pick a fight of the year, the action, that drama. There was a title at stake. Just a really outstanding fight among these little guys. And I have to say, I could not tell you. We just got the nominees done on Saturday, or a couple of days later. I still have to take my time to actually really think about what I'm going to vote for on this one. I was easy to tell you Bivol. It's a little tougher in my mind to tell you right off the bat who I think is going to be the winner of the fight of the year.
Absolutely. And not to be redundant, but just going back to what you were talking about with Charlo and Castaño, I mean, it was that to me, the benefit, or the ultimate benefit for choosing that fight is going to be able to say, the significance of that fight was so great. Like you said, I mean, that's what really drives that candidacy to win fight of the year.
For what it's worth, when the first half of the year ended, I did a piece for my Substack newsletter, Fight Freaks Unite, where I picked, just to have some fun. Here are my nominees for halfway through the year. What's the fight of the year halfway through the year? And my pick for halfway through the year was Charlo Castaño too. Now I have to decide, does it stand up? Because some of those fights that we talked about have come after July 1st.
Yeah. And the Fundora-Lubin fight, even though it wasn't for a title, was still a great battle. I mean, so much blood, right? So, I mean, there was a lot of action in that fight.
Which fight?
Fundora and Lubin?
Yeah, I mean, they actually were fighting. I mean, for what it's worth, they were fighting for the WBC's interim title. So there were some stakes there, put them in the position to become a mandatory. But yeah, I mean, that was a very dramatic and exciting fight. Also, this is one of the, and I've been picking fights of the year and fighter of the year either in the BWA awards or when I worked at USA Today. I did it for years. I did the awards on my own for many years at ESPN. I do them now for my own publication, and this is one of the toughest years for fight of the year that I can remember in a long time.
Great. So let's move on now to the Eddie Futch Award for Trainer of the Year. The 2022 nominees are Bill Haney, Devin Haney's father, who we know had that incredibly compelling drama before reaching the first fight against Kambosos, making it just in the nick of time. Derek James, the great trainer for Errol Spence and Jermell Charlo. A lot of people are saying this is a hands down award for Derek
And
James.
don't forget, by the way, he's also the trainer for Frank Martin, the lightweight, who scored a very important and big win this past Saturday against Michel Rivera.
Absolutely. And look, Derek James is a guy, you know him as well as I do, a guy who's paid his dues, who's true to the sport, who is, someone like, look at all he has to do is say, look, I've got a three belt champion here at welterweight and undisputed champion at 154.
To my knowledge, he's the only trainer in boxing at the moment that has two unified champions, one of whom is also undisputed. Yeah. And honestly, Derek James has been a nominee in years past, and there have been other years where he certainly was worthy to win the award. And again, no knock on these other great trainers, but it feels like if Derek James can't win this year, when Charlo became undisputed and Errol Spence unified 3 titles with a great performance in a knockout against Ordenis Ugas, and Frank Martin is an undefeated fighter that's making his name and just scored basically almost a shutout with a knockdown against Frank Martin. What else can he do?
Yeah. Third candidate is Gennady Mashyanov, who is Dmitry Bivol's trainer. Great year for him. I mean, do you say like, hey, he's the fighter of the year, but not the trainer of the year too? Still deserves to be on that list. Colin Nathan, who trains Natshinga, and then Bob Santos, who has a variety of guys, including Hector Luis Garcia, Carlos Adames, and who else, Dan?
He also is the trainer for Alberto Puello, who won one of the vacant 140-pound titles in the wake of Josh Taylor vacating and to concentrate on the rematch for the WBO belt against Jack Catterall. But yeah, Bob Santos had a heck of a year because Hector Luis Garcia came out of nowhere in an upset fashion to become a world champion. He's got Carlos Adames doing very well, having won an interim title, and Alberto Puello with the title of the WBA 140-pound title. So Santos had a good year also, and Bob's been around boxing. He knows his stuff. He's been,
Robert Guerrero.
Yeah, a lot of people that have been around for a while know Bob from more as his reputation and the accomplishments he had as a strength and conditioning coach. But he's made the transition where he also now has taken on the role of head trainer for a lot of these fighters, and he's done a great job. Bob is a boxing guy through and through. He's been around. Yeah. I've known Bob probably almost 20 years. And look, these are all, again, they're all great trainers. I mean, they all have a lot going for them. I have to say, though, it's going to be hard to not vote for Derek James. He probably deserved it at least another year before, and he didn't get it. And again, the accomplishments of the fighters. See, when you're the fighter of the year, you win the fights. When you're the trainer of the year, your guys win the fights. The manager of the year, it doesn't really matter if your guys wins or lose. It's about what kind of deals did you get them? How much money did you make them? What kind of business position did you put them in? But in the case of the trainer of the year, you are the guy that has crafted the game plan, motivated the guy, done what you have to do, and put him in the best position to win the fight. And it's one thing to do, like, again, I'm not knocking Dmitry Bivol's trainer, Gennady Mashyanov, but that's one fighter. Derek has done it with 3 this year, all with very significant victories. Now, unfortunately, Charlo only had the 1 fight this year. And unfortunately, Errol Spence only had the 1 fight this year. But look at the results. One guy became undisputed. The other guy unified a 3rd belt. And then he's got Martin, who's emerged as one of the top young lightweights in boxing. So it's a hard one to pick against Derek this year, in my mind.
It really is. I mean, I can even say, like, in the conversations that I have with Derek James, sometimes you get off the phone, you want to run through a wall for the guy, So he is quite the motivator, no doubt.
I'm going to say this. Derek would not say this publicly, I don't think. But if you spend a few minutes talking to him, I know he really wants to win the award. He and I can't blame him. It's like, if you're a fighter, you want to win a title, and winning the Trainer of the Year award from an organization like the BWA that's been around picking award winners in boxing for, where I think the organization is in its 95th year or something like that. It's meaningful. It's a line that goes on your resume that puts you, in that conversation when you're all said and done is, hey, is this guy going to make the Boxing Hall of Fame? That type of thing. And it's important. And I'm glad that guys want to win these awards. It makes them strive to be their best, like the fighters.
Yeah. And there's a slew of other categories that we're really not going to get into. There's the Good Guy Award, the Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism, the Award for Long and Meritorious Service, and then also the John McCain, Bill Crawford Courage Award, which, look, every year you look at those nominees on that list, Dan, and they're always impressive. And the list this year is just very powerful. Pritchard Colon, who has dealt with what he's had to deal with over all these years since suffering that near fatal head injury. Billy Dibb, who's fighting back from cancer, God bless him and his battles. The guy who's the writing awards are named after Bernard Fernandez from Philadelphia, just a great writer who's endured his own, personal battles with health. And Jose Santa Cruz Jr., who has, just been such a great survivor over the years. And then lastly, we've done stories on these guys and what they've had to endure over in the Ukraine. Alexander Usyk and Vasily Lomachenko as a joint nominee for that category. That's going to be very competitive. All of them have just carried on in such an impressive way.
That's the one award you don't want to be nominated for, to be honest with you. I mean, let's be honest about that. And last year, in the dual nominee was Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko, also dealing with the situation in Ukraine. They won. Usyk and Lomachenko obviously they're all worthy candidates. I mean, Bernard Fernandez has been my friend for 20 plus years. He's been a great leader of the Boxing Writers Association of America. He was the president for 5 terms or something like that. And if you've been around ringside or you've been in the organization, you know what a great guy he is, and a gentleman. And again, you just don't want to be nominated for this particular award. And you know what? We didn't go over the manager there either. There's a lot of guys.
No, I wanted to do that now. That was the last one that I wanted to touch on. So the Cus D'Amato Award for Manager of the Year is Louis DeCubas Jr., Bill Haney, Peter Kahn, Vadim Kornilov, who represents Dmitry Bivol, including others. I've done a story on the unbelievable stable of fighters that he has in Indio, California, and then Brian Peters. Let's talk about that category. And I know, Dan, go ahead and start with a guy that we know very well, Louis DeCubas Jr.
Well, Louis DeCubas Jr. has been around boxing since he was a kid. His father is Louis DeCubas Sr., who was the manager / promoter and worked with a lot of great fighters, including Roberto Duran, for example, and has just been around boxing forever. And he's grown up in the sport. Look, Louis is the manager on paper for a lot of top fighters. He also is really probably the most trusted, or one of the most trusted assistants / advisors for Al Heyman. He's the one that's recruited a lot of the talent that is with PBC. But just in terms of guys that he has on paper as the manager, and think about what these guys have done in the past year. Forget about all time. Caleb Plant or Dennis Ugas. Remember, this isn't about wins and losses. This is about putting your guys in the position to make the most and get the best deals. So Caleb Plant or Dennis Ugas, David Morrell, Hector Luis Garcia, Alberto Puello, Arislandi Lara, and Rolly Romero. And that's just a few guys. There's other fighters that he also manages too, but that's just a few of them. So he's had a lot of success, and he's definitely a worthy candidate, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and probably the front runner. I mean, Bill Haney obviously has his son, Devin Haney. Peter Kahn, had to probably endure some of the things that the managers have to endure in this business, right?
Listen, Peter had a big year, and Peter is a guy that had managed George Kambosos and got him basically put together the deal that got him the shot at TV. Now, that did not work out so great. At the time, he was also working with Triller, but he's the one that ended up sort of engineering that massive purse bid that Triller did. It ultimately got messed up, and Matchroom ended up getting the fight, but his guy won for a career high payday. But that was last year. This year, he got him the deal for Devin Haney, where he got 2 home fights in Australia for the biggest purses he ever made in his life. And even though George Kambosos basically eventually fired him, the terms for the second fight were already laid out in the contract for the first fight. So he really is responsible for, in many ways, the biggest paydays that George Kambosos has ever had. So that's the first thing. And that's just one fighter. He's also the manager for the undisputed women's super middleweight champion, which is Franchon Cruz, who's made her most money. He has the excellent prospect with Top Rank, the 154-pounder Xander Zayas, who just made, still a very young fighter, 20 years old, just made his first 6-figure payday on the Teofimo Lopez undercard last week, has him making other money outside the ring with sponsorship deals. He has, again, not a great fighter, but he's the manager for Emmanuel Tago, who he basically engineered the deal for him to get the career payday in his fight early this year against Ryan Garcia. So as the manager, he's done what he's supposed to do, and he's done a good job at it and made his fighters money.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Kubas here, but Vadim is also a significant player in this. I mean, when you talk about some of his guys like MJ Akhmadov, I butchered that. I know.
Akhmadaliev,
So Akhmadalov,
the unified great champion.
Yes, and you know, so many other guys who are so solid, you know, that are on their way.
He's really on this list largely because of Bivol.
Yeah,
because deals that they were able to work out for him, both in terms of the Canelo fight as well as the very big money that he was able to make by going over to the Middle East to do the fight against Zurdo Ramirez.
look, and let's be honest, you talk about manager of the year, Dan. I mean, that was a situation that he did manage. I mean, because there was a lot of controversy attached to Dimitri Bivol before he fought Canelo Alvarez over the whole Russia thing.
Yes, sir.
Vadim managed that in a very nice way. I mean, what Dimitri Bivol had to say about that conflict, I thought was definitely from the heart. But you know that Vadim had some things to do, you know, to say about trying to guide him through those.
Well, he and Bivol have been together. He's had Bivol I think he's had him since his professional debut. I remember Vadim talking to me about this guy, Dimitri Bivol, probably at a time when Dimitri was maybe like, I don't know, 4-5-0, 6-0, something like that. Keep an eye on this guy. He's going to be a future champion. Okay. I mean, Lance, how many managers tell you about guys and say that exact same thing? But you know, he was serious, and look what he's done with him. And he's making big money. He's in very marquee fights, and also a great candidate.
Yeah, and he's actually told me that about another one of his fighters that I was just thinking of, about Madrimov. So
yeah, man, it was another excellent young that he has.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, Dan. Thank you so much for your time. Now, the award winners will be announced on Tuesday, January.
Real quick, we forgot Brian Peters in that category also.
Go ahead.
He's the manager for Katie Taylor, who had a great year in the women's side of the sport. Made her biggest payday ever with the Amanda Serrano fight that took place at Madison Square Garden back in April.
And not only that, because of Katie Taylor and all the other great female fighters who really stepped to the forefront this year, we're adding an award. Well, at least it appears as if we're going to add an award. Right.
So that just so people know, we didn't go over women's fight of the year or women's fighter of the year, because in the Boxing Writers Association, they are handled by a separate committee, not the general membership, because of a lot of different reasons. So that is being handled on their own. We also get it out, obviously, that we award ourselves for the career award for excellence in boxing journalism, the Nat Fleischer Award. That is voted on by past winners. You and I are both past winners, so we get a vote. And as you were saying, all the awards will get announced January 10th.
Yeah, January 10th at noon Eastern time. It's going to be very interesting in so many of the categories. Dan, thank you for walking us through it. It was very interesting and informative as always. Enjoy your holidays. Looking forward to seeing you after the first of the year, my friend.
Sounds good, Lance. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, buddy.